Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. What I love about interviewing titans of an industry, especially when they're in business for more than 30 years now, is that they know a thing or two about business. So Liz, welcome to Consulting Leaders, and let's jump straight into it. How have you done it, running Weber Business Services since the early 90s?
Well, Guillaume, thank you first off for asking me to have a conversation with you. I'm honored to join you on your podcast. How I got started was I had basically came upon a dream when I was in my senior year of college at university. I had gotten my degree in international business, and I was taking what's called a capstone course, which is tying all the different topical areas together. And that course was taught by someone by the name of Jim Farrell, but he was this thing called a consultant, and I had never heard of it before. But what he did, and he was not a university professor, he was a businessman. He was this thing called a consultant, and he would explain to us what he would do with his clients, in that, yes, they might have an issue with marketing, and yes, they might have an issue with finance, or yes, they might have an issue with leadership performance. And he was able to weave a lot of the theories that as a student I was hearing about in those different classes, and he was putting them into real life play and action with clients. And I fell in love with that idea. And I got this dream, this idea that someday I want to do that. And so when I first got my first job, I was working with the U.S. Department of State in Washington, D.C. in the States. And I was working with a number of outside consulting firms. And I happened to mention to them, I want to be a consultant. And to this day, I'm forever grateful, because I was about 23 or 24 years of age at the time. And very smartly and gratefully, they said to me, Liz, that's a great dream, but you don't have any experience. So no one's really going to take you seriously yet. So get some experience being a manager, get some experience being a business owner, because if you want to be a management consultant, you have to feel in your gut what the business owner feels in his or her gut. So when you give them some advice, you're basing it on your personal experience, your proven experience, and also your gut, not some theory. And I'm forever grateful for that. So to get to the story, I decided to, after about 10 years, leave the State Department. I started my own company as a training company, and I was training basically supervisory and leadership topics. And that exposure started to get me in front of more senior level people. And I just found that I resonated with more senior level people than I did with the front line and mid-level leaders. I enjoyed working with them, but I felt their frustration that they weren't in a position to make decisions. And I realized that if I could be in the conversations with the executive team or the boards of directors or the business owners to help influence decisions, policy, their actions, we could get things done quicker based upon what I was hearing in the training rooms, and I could bring that information to them and we could make things happen. So that's where I started getting involved with them in doing what I do now with my business, is strategic planning, succession planning, and then leadership, business advisory and coaching work. And it's what I've basically been doing almost completely for the past probably 15 years has been my focus.
Not bored?
I'm sorry, you broke up?
Are you not bored out of doing the same thing for 15 years in a row?
No, I love it. And I love it because I learn from my clients.
Mhm.
Um, you and I and all your listeners know, uh, there are a lot of similarities, and there are very few unique situations. So your question is a really good question. The challenge for me and the challenge for my clients is, how do I time the advice that I give them? And how do I adjust the advice that I may have given 300 times already, but how do I customize it to this particular client at this particular time, given the particular situations that he or she is facing? And that's where I have fun. That's what I enjoy. That's where the challenge is for me. And it's an opportunity to always continuously learn, because I'm in the rooms with senior staff, with business owners, with boards of directors, with people in technology, with people in finance and investments and banking. Um, so I'm continually being educated myself. So I don't get bored. I love what I do. I'm very fortunate in that I like what I do.
You mentioned, and I love it because we're going to get a bit more into the meta aspect of consulting instead of just the business of it. But I think this is a particularly interesting point. So, and you're very grateful for that, the fact that the people who told you when you wanted to get into consulting, like, hey, you don't have any experience yet, continue as a trainer, continue as a business owner potentially, and then you will be able to feel in your gut what the business owner is feeling. When I hear that, I couldn't agree more. Like, since I started my company, I'm only taking advice from people who've done what I'm trying to achieve. But I also think back to my experience at PwC, where they would hire junior people, right? Young graduates, train them, and the model works. But so, what are your thoughts around building your own experience and then getting into consulting, or coming in as a junior into consulting and then rising up the ranks and being able to be at the higher level of a consulting firm? What are your thoughts on that after 30 years of experience?
Well, I think both can work, and I'll explain a little bit more, because I somewhat came up through the ranks. When I was working with the State Department, I was in the State Department version of the military commissary system, the office that gets food and supplies to American embassies and consulates around the world. So I was in a business office, and in that office, I was basically a consultant to our officials and foreign nationals at the different embassies and consulates around the world. And I, like, a young 20-something at PwC, I came right out of college, and I read the regulations and I followed the regulations. If the regulation said you could do this, you could do it. If you didn't, you didn't. And I was really good at my job because I could follow the instructions. And I remember to this day, an ambassador came into our office, and I had the nerve to tell the ambassador, and I think he was stationed in a really challenging post, someplace in Africa. I mean, he was in a challenging post. And I had the nerve to tell him he couldn't do something because it was black or white. And he said, Liz, sometimes you have to operate in the gray. And I just could not get it through my head there was right or wrong. And I look back at that stupid, naive me at the time, but to this day, I remember him because I get it now. I get it, having been in that situation. There was value in me working my way up through the ranks as a young 20-something-year-old, because you have to learn the fundamentals. You have to learn the rules, because that enables you, through experience, through insight, through the hard knocks, to know later when you can bend the rules legally to achieve the right outcome and move things forward. And so I think, to answer your question there, I think both can work, but I think it's important that when you are bringing young people up through the ranks, you're really intentional about communicating with them and making them keenly aware that they are learning the fundamentals, and they need to learn the fundamentals, because from that foundation, they will be able to understand later, when they have more experience, when those fundamentals can be adjusted a little bit to enhance a situation.
I hear you, and I couldn't agree more. When I was in the skin of this young consultant, though, how frustrating is it? Like you want to jump from project to project, new technology, new company, new client, new everything, but it's actually in the becoming an SME, learning everything there is to learn about the topic. And this is also where the value is for the consulting firm. Let's say the terms, like you can place a consultant who is, an expert in his craft. But sometimes we tend to want to go a little bit too fast. For that little ambassador story, if an ambassador doesn't tell you that you have to meet in the middle and compromise, I don't think that he would have been a good ambassador anyway. So that would make sense.
Hmm.
Liz, who do you serve now? So who do you help? Is it still government institutions only, or like can you give us a bit of an idea of who you're helping?
Sure. So my current client base is comprised of, I have several state government agencies, so I have clients in several different states that I work with, but I also work with private sector financial services firms, construction companies, healthcare facilities, kind of a broad spectrum of private sector. Also some trade associations, professional associations, and I currently just have one nonprofit. So it's somewhat diversified.
It's the very least we can say. So what problem do you solve for those companies now? I mean, we get the, management consultants. You mentioned a few things: strategic planning, business advisory, and coaching work. When you're working a state government agency or private sector, any of the ones that you mentioned here, what would you say is the problem that you solve for what outcome?
The consistent value that I see that I bring clients is, it's become my slogan or mantra. I help my clients focus on the right things at the right time to get the right impact or the right outcome. And what I mean by that, whether it's, through a formal strategic planning project and actually creating a plan and sequencing initiatives, or most often it's simply sitting down with them and listening to them as far as what are the current plate of challenges in front of them, and how do we identify how to sequence those challenges to focus their energies, minimize their stress and anxiety, and help them have maximum impact and leverage movement on one to multiple areas. And so it's really helping them think through, where do I start? They've got what seems to be an overwhelming, somewhat of a mess. And it's like, where do I start? Because everybody's looking at me right now. And I have to share with you, Gammy, I heard a quote by Dr. Arthur C. Brooks. He's a professor of management at Harvard University. And I just heard him say that anxiety is really unfocused fear. And when I heard him say that, I was like, that's exactly what I'm hoping to bring in my clients when they're confused, they're frustrated, they're anxious, they're getting pressure from the board, they're getting pressure from the shareholders, they're getting pressure from staff. They're not sure what to do or where to focus their energies next. And so my job with them is to look at things as objectively as possible and identify what is your first move, and then what is your second move, and what is your third move, and so on.
Love that you focus on defining the terms very clearly so that everybody can understand it. This example with anxiety is perfect because I think it's so spot on. Unfocused fear. You define the first step, the second step, the third step. How do you find where the problem is in the first place so that we can define the first step, the second step, the third step? When you come in, I mean, there is this amazing quote. I'm going to use a quote as well from Steve Jobs, and I hope I'm not going to butcher it. He's like, um, consultants know everything about a banana, but they've only seen it in 2D. When you walk in the company, you see all the aspects of the banana. You see inside out. You see in all its shape, in all its ripening cycles, however we say it. When you arrive in a company as a consultant, although you have the industry experience you've seen with other companies, how do you, with your experience, Liz, come in and identify that one main constraint that people actually need to focus on so that they can unlock step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5?
I am fortunate in that the majority of my engagements with clients are either long term, so I've already have a relationship with them for multiple years, or I have a multifaceted engagement with them. And either one of those two scenarios invariably put me in touch regularly with not only my primary point of contact, who might be the business owner, the president, the executive director, whomever the most senior person is, but more often than not, I'm also interacting through coaching, advisory, it might be a training or something, with their 1 or 2 levels of leaders below them. So I get to understand a lot of the team dynamics, the cultural dynamics, and I hear the challenges from multiple perspectives. And invariably, there are some common through lines that start popping up. And it's invariably it's lack of accountability, lack of clear leadership, lack of clear communication, lack of follow through, lack of focus, whatever it might be. And it's just a matter of identifying, given this organization, this time, this desired outcome that they're looking for, the timeframes that we have to work within, what do we focus on first? And given what we're hearing from all the different parties. And again, typically when I am then suggesting an approach, whether it's one-on-one or one to a group, keep in mind I've heard from multiple parties. And so even if it's one-on-one, typically, and I honestly today I just had lunch with one of my clients, and I was debriefing with him what I've heard from a number of his managers. And as I was talking, he was doing this. He was sitting there nodding his head, and he said, "Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right." Because he's either heard it himself or seen it himself too. And so it's a way for me to affirm with my clients, I'm seeing what you're seeing, granted, not to the depth that you're seeing it or experience it, but I am validating and here's the key part, what you probably already know in your gut, but have not yet elevated to top priority of this issue. If I don't deal with this, or if I don't deal with this person and her wild behavior, it is going to continue to take us off course.
It's the second time you reference feeling it in your guts. What part of this do you feel is, let me rephrase that. When I think about consulting, I think about basing yourself on data, basing yourself on best practices in the industry, basing yourself on leveraging everything that you've learned before. Going in with your guts is not what a typical partner would tell his managers and associates to go with. It's like data-based, look at all the data, refine it, understand it, come up with conclusions, propose recommendations. Why is it that important to you, feeling it in your guts?
Well, let me clarify 2 things.
Mm-hmm.
When I use the term feel it in your gut, what I'm actually really referring to, and I probably need to be clearer in my words, is using your emotional intelligence and situation awareness to read the room, whether it's in person or virtual, because we're dealing with people. And so many times, and you probably have had this conversation several times on your podcast, people are like, well, Liz, aren't you afraid of AI taking your job as a consultant? No, not at all, because I read the room. And I can come in with all the data. I can come in with all the surveys. I can come in with all the hard facts. So can ChatGPT. But as of yet, it can't read the room, and it doesn't know the personalities. I do. And so I can see when someone starts glaring at somebody else across the room. I can see when somebody just sits back in their chair and they just disconnected. And I know what's probably triggering that, and I've got to bring that out in the conversation. So that's part of why I am so adamant when I say You got to feel it in your gut. You got to read the room, and you got to read the emotions, because we're dealing with people. The second part of this, and why I'm so focused on dealing with the emotional side of it, is, again, we're dealing with people. The proliferation of technology and AI and people's fear of losing their jobs or losing their humanity, whatever it might be, for someone like me who was around in the 1980s when process reengineering was this big thing, it worked in some instances, it failed in many, many others. And the reason it failed in many, many others, because the engineers and the consultants that came in and said, we know through data and timesheets and run sheets how to redesign this process flow. And they did. It was mathematically and scientifically and engineering wise perfect. They didn't bring the people along, and they didn't set the people up and tee them up for success. And so they didn't marry the two sides of what you need to move an organization forward. As long as you still have people involved, you have to bring them forward with you. And you and I and your listeners know people are quirky things. People are emotional things. And so and by emotion, I'm not necessarily saying they're yelling and screaming all the time or crying all the time, but people can feel offended. People can feel frustrated. People can get angry. People can get excited. People can get nervous. People can get fearful. And it can all be very subtle. And any of those emotions can inhibit the conversation, can take the conversation down a track we didn't want to go. And as a consultant, if my job is to, during a work session, get them from point A to point B so we can complete this part of the strategic plan, I've got to read the room and move people along that path to get to where I need to take them. And so I have to watch what's happening with my people, and are they still engaged with me and with each other and with what we're trying to accomplish here.
Makes perfect sense. A bit earlier, Liz, you mentioned that you have those long-term relationships built now, and you mainly do business with people who you've been in like a relationship for a while already. How do you go about marketing your firm, branding your firm? Because when you already have those significant institutions already working with you, is it something you even feel that you need to do? Actually, let's start with that. Is it something you feel you need to do, marketing and branding?
Sure, I do. And because I never want to, as the saying goes, put my eggs all in one basket. And um, it's also important for me, as I alluded to earlier, to continue to learn. And I am by no means an expert in the clients that I've had, long-term relationships with, but I like to continue to learn and learn about other organizations, other businesses, other industries, but also help other clients. And not all of my clients have been with me for multiple years. So some come and go, and some are gone after 3 years, but a couple I've had around for a couple decades. But quite often my engagement with clients at a minimum is 6 months long. And it's usually 9 months to 12 months to 3 years is a typical engagement. So whether that is for coaching, whether that's for advisory services, or if it's with strategic planning, it's a multi-year engagement. So it to me, it's one of those just must-haves for business. I've got to keep things coming in the pipeline.
Makes sense. And when we look at what you're doing, right, from the outside, it looks like you've built a super strong authority. You have books, you have board roles, quite interesting, global speaking, and daily content. So for the B2B coaches and consultants listening to us right now, can you break down if you didn't have all this, right? Because I'd say 80, 85% of the B2B coaches and consultants I talk to mainly rely on referral, which in my opinion is not a good thing, but that's what happens in reality. Because you start as a consultant, you do a good job, the client refers you to another client, and you build like this and you grow steadily. Clearly, you've taken another approach. So what would you recommend consultants do if they were to ramp up some marketing endeavors, and what has worked specifically for you that you can say, yes, this is something that worked for me and might work for you if you do it a certain way.
Absolutely, because I've lived that. I did the same thing when I first started out. I my former employer at the State Department became my first client. And I worked out through the military bases that I had already had contacts with. And the challenge for me at the time, and probably for many of your listeners, is being able to concisely say, what is your value to a business or to a person who doesn't already know what you do? What problem of theirs do you solve? And how can you say that in a way that is attractive to someone who does not know you and is comparing you as a potential against another client or a couple other clients? Why should they choose you? And I will say in full candor, I can say that question confidently now, but when I had to work on it myself, that's really hard. It is really, really hard to articulate what value you bring to a customer. I know I'm good. I know they like what I did. I know they got value and they liked working with me and I delivered on time, but it's really hard to articulate what the value was. So here's a couple things that I did. Number one of the things that I did, and it's scary, it was really scary, is I sent a survey out to all of my clients at the time. And I said, I am going to be updating my marketing material, and I simply want to ask you two questions. The first question is, if you were to explain to a colleague and a peer of yours what I've done for you, what would you say? And I said that because I needed to hear it in their words. And I need them to say, if they were talking to one of their colleagues, one of their buddies at the golf course, or somebody, if they're watching a football match or whatever it might be, what would you say to somebody who lives in your world about me? How would you describe the value I added? That was hugely helpful. The second thing that I did on that same survey, after I asked them the first question, was the second question. I said, here are, I think it was 8 or 10 items that I had listed. I said, please rank order these from most to least valuable of what I have done for you. And it was things like, help clarify our strategic goals and helped us uncover, hidden problems, or all these things that I thought I had done, in addition to help me understand my role as a leader, help me understand my role as a business owner. And then another one was, something else, etc. And I thought they were going to come back and they were going to say, Liz helped us create the best strategic plan we'd ever had on God's green earth, and it was just amazing. The number one thing they came back and said I helped them with was helping me understand my job as either a manager or understand my job as a business owner. And I was like, really? That was it? And at first I was incredibly depressed because my ego was like, well, that doesn't sound very sexy. But that insight helped me realize that if it's happening with my client base, there's got to be other senior executives and managers and business owners out there that are questioning, what am I really supposed to be doing in this job? Because I seem to really stuck at it, or I'm angry about it, or I'm frightened about it, or I'm frustrated and I feel like I'm making it up. And if I could help them get clear on what their role is as a leader, then I could add some value. And that's a long answer to your question, but that's what helped me hone in on, if this is what they say I do to add value, then that's what I do to add value. Because I will tell you that the answer to the first question that I got back from my clients, if you or your listeners go onto my website, a lot of the testimonials that I have on my website are the answers to that question. And it's like Liz helped us understand how to work on the business, not in the business. Well, that's brilliant. I didn't come up with that. You know, I had a colleague call and ask if they should hire Liz for training, and they said, I think she's going to be pretty tough on them. And I told them she will be, but that's probably what you need. Oh my God, that's amazing. So that question helped not only identify what value I bring, but it also started to brand me. And it helped me get comfortable with my clients are comfortable with me being very polite and very nice, but I'm firm with them. And I tell them candidly what I see they're doing that's probably not helping their business and how they need to change.
Um, Too many golden nuggets of knowledge in here, so I won't be able to dig into all of them, but there are a few that I want to highlight. So first of all, thanks, Liz. You're making my job a bit useless because I was going to say this is an amazing way to get testimonials from your clients. Like, candidly ask what they would say about you, and then say, amazing, if it's a good one, amazing. Can I use this as a testimonial? Boom, frictionless, because that's something a lot of B2B coaches and consultants struggle with. So a few things that I think are super important to double down on here, especially if you're considering building your marketing, your brand. And it sounds obvious when we say it, but so many people don't do this. Speak your customer's language in their words, what matters to them. So many people get lost into, redesigning the website, having the fancy words, having the fancy graphics. What about the number one problem statement in their language? Simple. Clarity beats fancy each and every time. Now, what about the fact that some people, Liz, might think that they have a problem versus another problem that they really have, they don't even know of? So, I mean, I'm quoting Steve Jobs a lot. That's not to think that I'm a fan. I am. But that's not why I'm quoting him. People don't know what they want. So between what someone think you help them the most with versus what was actually their deep problem that they got solved, but they couldn't realize it. And here I'm really like going into the very deep down rabbit hole. How do you adjust that? Because you know that your customers say they help me understand, she helped me understand my role better as a manager, as a director, as a leader. But what about the 90 other things that you did that actually grew the business and helped them, see a business case here?
That's an excellent question, and that happens frequently. And and I'm at the stage of my career where I'm much more comfortable with it than I was in full candor when I was starting out, because you need the money, you need the jobs. But quite often how clients came to me when I first started my company was through the training business. And quite often I would receive phone calls from the human resources director, the training director, saying, I've been told to reach out to you because our owner or our leadership teams needs you to fix our managers because they don't know how to be managers. And so when I would jump on a call to start learning some more about it, and I would start asking questions, I and again, it took me a couple years because sure, I could go deliver the training program and it was fine. But as I started experiencing in the training room and hearing from the managers who are being charged with doing work inside an organization where there's a lack of focus, where there's no direction, where there's no clear plan or strategy, and things seem to be reactive and not proactive, and there's always expedited problems. I started realizing if if we could get ahead of the training and create clarity for the management team of this is the type of company you are trying to build, and so this is the type of company that you need to learn how to lead. So let's create a strategic plan and direction for the company first, and then we can design your training program to design the skills you need now, but the skills you're also going to need in the future to lead the company of the future. And so when I got that clarity in my head, and I realized that I could continue providing training programs and basically, I could make money and I could spit them out, but they wouldn't really last or have the impact because the underlying foundation of a stable company and its focus was not going to be there. My reputation as providing valuable training was going to decline because I didn't have a track record. I wouldn't have a track record of customers saying, yeah, Liz trained us 3 years ago and things are still going great. It was more of, yeah, we had the training, but after she left, it all fell apart. That's a bad reflection on my company and my training. And so in a way for pure survival, I made the move, but also it became somewhat of a differentiator when I would talk with prospective clients because when I would be called in to again, provide training, in my fact finding, I would say, I'm happy to talk with the HR director, the training director, but I also want to talk with the president of the company because number one, he or she's going to authorize this, but I need them to be involved as well. And it was like, well, why? And I was like, I'll explain to them when they're on the call. And quite often the owner would come on and it's like, I don't need the training. And I would explain, well, I want you to think about it this way. You have the team you have and you've taken them this far and now they're plateaued, which means you don't have the skills right now to take them to the next level. And that's what you're asking me to do. And I need you to learn how to lead them at the next level. That's why I need you to be in the training with them. And that's like, oh, she's just not trying to upsell me. She's actually making a little bit of sense here. And then I'll say, and I'm also going to throw another idea out at you. And you can tell me to walk out the door right now, or you can sit and think about it a little bit. We can do the training and you can spend the money on a 6-month or 9-month or year-long training program for your managers, and they will learn things. They will learn things. Will it turn your company around? No, but they will learn things. Or what we can do first, and then we can add the training, not too long from now, but we'll add the training. We can create a strategic plan with your leaders to help them help you design and create a company that you want for the future and you want them to be a part of. And then we align all the training to meet that outcome. That gives you clarity. It gives you a roadmap. It gives you timelines. It helps you with your resource loading. It helps you with your budgeting. It helps you with your expectations, and it aligns all of their efforts. That gets you sustainability, and that lasts more than a year, and that increases your ROI. And then when I say that to them, they're like, oh, wow. She's not just trying to upsell me. That made a whole lot of sense. It's going to cost more money, but that just made a whole lot more sense. And I don't know, I'm kind of thinking already that might be worth the money, but I don't want to say anything yet because she's still sitting right here with me. So it's having the experience of knowing how to package effectively to have a better ROI for the client to really address their core problem. And in most situations with my clients, their core problem is lack of focus and lack of knowing what to do next and then how to lead to that. And so, yeah, you might have a leadership issue and they don't have great skills, but we got to figure out how to focus them all on the same thing first, and then we can move them forward.
This was an absolute masterclass. That already answers. So again, you're doing my job for me, Liz. Thank you. That kind of answers the question around how do you do sales? How do you retain? So let me maybe finish on this, on the final bouquet. What's your challenge right now? What is the thing that you're working on to unlock the next level of growth? What is Liz working on in her business to take it to the next level?
Well, my situation is I've been in business 33 years, it'll be 34 years next year. I actually have intentionally pulled back on my business over the last 2 years. I am not looking to grow. I am not looking to scale. I am at this point in my life where I am in a very very nice position. So I am choosing clients that I choose to work with. I'm very fortunate in that I've got, as I said, long-term clients, but I am currently busier than I've been before with more advisory work and making more money than I ever have where I currently am at. And so I'm not looking to scale. I'm not looking to grow. I'm not looking to bring on staff again. I'm not looking to bring on too many more consultants to sub work with me. I have branded myself as a business advisor, executive coach, consultant, kind of a solo team right now. And it works well for me. That's where my business is.
Which for you. Liz, thank you so much for this time. This was amazing. If people want to find out more about you, see what you do, not try to work with you because you're already busy and choose the clients you work with, but if they want to find out more about nonetheless, where should they go?
I would recommend two locations. Number one, my LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile and handle is Liz Weber CMC, and Weber has just one B. Or my website, which is wbsllc.com.
Put all the links in the description. Liz, thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time. Exactly.